Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Umoya webinar on COVID-19 is a trigger to innovation. My name is Connie Chijara, and I'll be chairing today's webinar. I have the privilege of welcoming our three speakers today. We have Dave Morris, Dr. Craig Parker, and Anthony Mello. Dave Morris was born in the UK and graduated from Imperial College, London, with a degree in mineral technology. He has worked in the mining industry for nearly 40 years in a variety of roles, ranging from operational roles to executive leadership. His experience includes technical, project, and production responsibilities, as well as business transactions, safety, health and environmental management, and business improvement. Dave retired from the mining industry in 2016 and has been supporting nonprofit organizations and social enterprises in the fields of education, leadership, social justice, and nation building, and now with Umoya Health. He is a director of Symphonia for South Africa, St. Andrew's School for Girls, and Umoya. Dave believes the road to creating a better future for all in South Africa is one of active citizenship mobilized to work alongside a capable state, and that there is an opportunity for business to operate with a more inclusive set of objectives. We also have Dr. Craig Parker, who is a medical officer in the anesthetic department of Frere Hospital in East London. Prior to medicine, he studied engineering and spent 20 years working in the mining industry as a mechanical engineer and project manager, working locally and elsewhere in Africa. He has a passion for rural health and in trying to solve unique problems with rural and other limited resource health environments present. He started his project as he felt that there was an obvious gap in the ability to provide respiratory comprised patients with a solution besides incubation and ventilator support in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. And he had some ideas of what was needed to fill the gap. He is married to Catherine, an ICU nurse, also on the front line of the pandemic, and they have 2 teenage children. And lastly, we have Anthony Mello, an operations and business strategy enthusiast. Anthony has a love for problem solving, people, innovation, and making a meaningful impact in the mining industry. He spent 5 years at Anglo Gold Ashanti as a metallurgical engineer, responsible for the core production processes, as well as improvement strategies, systems, and initiatives. Anthony then decided to take a short sabbatical to pursue a full-time MBA. And then shortly after that, he began his current engagement with Rumo Collaborations, focusing on applying systems thinking methodology to maximize the operational systems capability of business operations. This is where he has been involved in building an experiential simulation center called SAIMM. Anthony has a passion for social innovation and rethinking the role of business in society. He works very closely with several nonprofit organizations in various initiatives driving social change. So please enjoy the webinar and remember to post any of your questions in the question and answer section.
So hi everyone, and thank you for that introduction. I'm Craig Parker, and it's great to be in front of some mining and metallurgy colleagues again. It's been a long time since I was in front of my engineering peers, so it's really good to be back. So thanks for having us, and for showing an interest in really what we've done and what we do, and we hope that this session will be of interest and enjoyable for those of you watching. So really, what are we going to cover today? Thanks, Anthony. Just to look at our index there. So really, who we are and why have we done this, and then 3 sort of keywords that we'd like to touch on, being agility, collaboration, as well as well as connectedness. And really our desire is that these stimulate some thought and maybe get you, inspired to look at your businesses a little differently, to look at your daily work a little differently, and specifically to look at the teams and the project teams that you put together, and perhaps stimulate some thought on some alternative ways to do it. Great. So thanks, Anthony. Really, who is Umoya? What are we about? So Umoya arose out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're a real motley crew of people, one or two doctors, and really mostly engineers and innovators, really, in the East London area mainly. And then as we grew, we broadened that to involve our colleagues from my colleagues from the mining industry. So we've got Dave and Anthony here, but there were many players in the early days of Umoya. We had Hatch was involved. We had De Beers helping us at one stage with some work. So there really has been a very broad-based collaborative effort. And yeah, we're based in East London, which not many people think about much. East London, what really happens here? We have a Mercedes factory, but beyond that, I'm sure most people have very few people have visited here. But it's really been the hub of where we've been able to do this work.
We heard the rumblings on the horizon. I don't think any of us expected the scale of what was to come. I actually travelled to the UK. My grandmother turned 100. My colleagues told me I was mad, but we'd invested so much and we weren't sure, whether she would survive this pandemic. But it was while I was in that space, seeing how with all their resources, how much they were struggling, just realizing that we were going to be in real trouble. And on the long flights back here, to try and start thinking about what we could do. You can't just put up a tent and put people in there on ventilators. You've got to have trained people. And we had massive gaps. And that was the sort of bastion of therapy initially in the pandemic. ICU and ventilation for the seriously ill. And I didn't think that was going to fix our problem.
Right, Sika, you take a deep breath. And again, fantastic. Another one.
One of my friends contacted me and said, no, look, there's a doctor putting a group together. Something I've never done, it's a field I've never worked in, medical field. It's a challenge.
I had one colleague here at the hospital who could bounce ideas off him. But then really the rest of the team was all people signed up through Facebook. And very soon we had a team of designers and engineers working on it. Our initial ideas were to use non-invasive ventilation, something that could be used in a ward where you didn't have highly skilled staff and you didn't have lots and lots of oxygen.
Our first devices were based on diving regulators. Quite a lot of us have done scuba diving and we had stuff lying around and we could play around with it.
We had 2 weeks of complete lockdown.
Can't get spring wire, can't get springs made, so I ended up using welding wire out of a welding machine, sort of make my own springs.
Really, we'd have an idea, in the middle of the night, share it in the morning. Somebody would have it designed by mid-morning, lunchtime they'd be printing, and in the afternoon we'd have a prototype.
I printed some simple non-return valves, and my wife was actually putting one back together, but she put it back together the wrong way around. I looked at this thing and I blew through it and I felt, hey, there's a bit of resistance, and that's what we were looking for. So for a while we called it the Roxy valve.
So that was incredible. So we were able to then connect it up and say, no, it needs tweaking here, or this is not right, or let's redesign it completely, start again. That happened a few times.
So it was trial and error, but it worked.
So it uses no more than a normal bag, so it's 15 liters a minute, whereas your CPAP units, those are 60 plus. I think initially we expected it to work, but we were taken by surprise about how well it worked. And it's ludicrously simple. There's a concept of PEEP, when you breathe out, having something to breathe out against. It's all part of helping the lungs to re-expand.
I saw dramatic results. I saw patients who were not coping on the standard oxygen masks actually get to high oxygen saturation levels in the 90s. So they went from dramatically low levels in the 50s and 60s all the way up into the 90s with that Oxera mask.
I think we had so little to offer besides oxygen. Our ICU was full, we didn't have enough oxygen ports. So it was heartbreaking seeing people waiting, having to watch their relatives, many of them demise, there with them waiting. And those first few patients where we saw them languishing at very, very low sats, and when we saw their sats with every breath sort of just climbing, I just realized that there was now a little bit more hope, that we had another option, another arrow in our quiver for those really sick patients. Our dream is that one day it becomes a standard item that you would see in any hospital made by 100 different manufacturers. Oh, it's restored my faith in people, just to see how we heard the rumblings on the horizon.
In the 90s, so they went from dramatically low levels in the 50s and 60s all the way up into the 90s with that Oxera mask.
I think we had so little to offer besides oxygen. Our ICU was full, we didn't have enough oxygen ports. So it was heartbreaking seeing people waiting, having to watch their relatives, many of them demise, there with them waiting. And those first few patients where we saw them languishing at very, very low sats, and when we saw their sats with every breath sort of just climbing, I just realized that there was now a little bit more hope, that we had another option, another arrow in our quiver for those really sick patients. Our dream is that one day it becomes a standard item that you would see in any hospital made by 100 different manufacturers. Oh, it's restored my faith in people, just to see how strangers are willing to step up and get involved. Our people have given so sacrificially, with no expectation, for complete strangers, has just been phenomenal. To be part of that has been incredible.
Thank you, Anthony, and apologies for the little bit of a repeat there at the end, but hopefully that put it in context in terms of what we did, and thanks to Discovery for doing that video for us and letting us share it. So really Umoya was built on what we've called the sort of burning platform concept, and a burning platform, you've got to do something about it, and you've got to do something about it now. And it really helps focus your attention. And so COVID-19 was that environment for us that created a very clear focus for our team, good alignment, and was underpinned by a real feeling that we were doing something meaningful for a large number of people. So that was really key in how we were set up, and I think was really key in how quickly we were able to get a team together of like-minded people. And and as I mentioned earlier, we'd like to just share some of the learnings that have come out of putting this project together, doing this as a team, and hopefully there's a few things that you can take away and some ideas for yourselves. Great, thanks, Anthony. So really just, you saw the Oxera in the video. It would be remiss of me not to explain a little bit about what it is. So it's really just a device which assists with respiration. So it takes two components from that we use in hospitals every day. So the bag that you see there If you've ever been admitted to a hospital or you've watched any movies, you will have seen patients in the wards with those masks with a bag on them. And those don't use much oxygen, but they're not very efficient at delivering oxygen to patients because there's lots of leakage, and it's just the way they're designed and made. They're meant to be that way because they're quite safe. If a patient vomits or something, they're not going to have any issues. And then the PEEP valve, which is really something borrowed from the ventilator world, where high care and ICUs would use either patients who are intubated or very tight and snug-fitting masks and add on PEEP to their therapy. So we were able to sort of marry those two worlds into a very simple portable device that it really does save oxygen. So it allows you to use very low oxygen flows. It's very simple. Anyone can use it. And inexpensive compared to alternative therapies, and then really very effective at managing quite sick COVID patients. So we've had just great feedback from their use. And where are they used? Really any place where oxygen is a constraint and where resources are a constraint. So we've seen them used across the country, in Zimbabwe, Zambia, other places wherever you're struggling to provide patients with adequate care because of those constraints. That we've seen them to be very, very effectively used. So smaller hospitals, even mine hospitals up in Zambia, Medanta donated some to the Zambian government up there, and we believe they were used up in those mine hospitals there. Also lots of potential outside of COVID, certainly for high altitude use, for other patients who require a little bit of PEEP and higher oxygen concentrations, pregnant patients with pulmonary edema and things like that. High altitude sicknesses, there's a pulmonary edema component, which is why it makes sense that it might be useful there. And then, even if we think about, mine rescue. So somebody deep down underground who's got a crushing chest injury, you need to transport them to surface. It's going to take you some time. You've got limited options in terms of transferring them. And, the Oxera might ultimately find a useful place there. So it'll be interesting to watch this space. Obviously, more research and trials are required beyond COVID. But we're quite excited about the potential of where this device is going to go. So then as we looked at the concept of agility, so what was it about Umoya and the development of the Oxera that stood out for us as a business? And I've just got 5 quick points there, which I'd like to take you through. So the first thing was that people volunteered, people signed up and said, this is my strength that I would like to bring to bear in terms of bringing this project to a successful outcome. And I think, many times the projects I've been involved in, people get assigned. And so you would allocate your team based on their skills and experience. And I wonder if there's not room for allowing a little more flexibility there, where we can let people choose, first of all, projects that interest and excite them, and secondly, where they feel their experience and expertise can best be used. Perhaps there's some opportunity there, and allowing people then to the freedom to work in their area of expertise. So not micromanaging, giving people space and accountability to do their work and to do it well. We also needed to think sort of counter-current. There was, right in the early days of COVID, there was, non-invasive ventilation was taboo. Everyone was worried about the aerosol generation potential of non-invasive ventilation. And so everyone said, we're mad. We're not going to be able to do this. But we've persisted because we believed it was the right thing, and ultimately non-invasive ventilation became the norm. Things changed. So it's about being willing to tackle, not go with the flow, to be able to say we've got some different ideas. This is a completely new class of medical device as well. So, you know, innovation is always challenging if you just go with the flow. So allowing people, even in fairly mundane things, to be able to challenge the status quo and swim upstream if needed. And then a really important thing was that we needed to not have any sacred cows. We couldn't have any pet projects, you know, pet ideas that we hung on to when they didn't work. So we went through multiple iterations. And in fact, we had some other much grander ideas. We had a whole ward delivery system that we actually put in as a demo unit with pipes and tanks and pressure controllers, a massive project, and it didn't work, and we had to abandon it. We had to quickly change direction, and for the whole team to buy into that and realize that, you know, if it doesn't work, we park. No matter how much time or energy or money we've spent on it, if it's not going to work, it has to go. And so that, yeah, I mean, it cost us some money, but it allowed us to very quickly get to the product that ultimately worked. And then, you know, ultimately that's resulted in a product that works, and we've been able to establish a company, a social enterprise. Dave and Anthony will take us through what that means. And we've got a number of other products that we are developing for the resource constrained space. And so you know, the profits we've made, we've been able to put back into that. And so we're really excited about you know, about where we're going, and the whole company is. You know, everyone involved is really excited because they've been part of building that through you know, bringing their experience and their skills to bear. So yeah, that's probably enough from me. Over to, I guess, Anthony, you next. Thank you.
Hopefully that you find my unmute and video buttons there. Thanks, Craig. So what I'm going to talk about, as you saw in the sort of context or agenda that Craig put up in the beginning, is this whole concept of collaboration. But before I jump into that, it's a couple of concepts that I want to get across that will lead into how we came to develop the model, or the social enterprise model that Umoya operates under. So many of you would have seen this sort of what's called the golden circle model or theory. It's really been made famous by Simon Sinek. I mean, his TED Talk now is, I think, the top 3 or top 5 most watched ever TED Talks that's ever been given, with a couple of 100 million views that it's had. And the reason that is because it really resonates with a lot of people, and it really resonates with what Umoya does as well. And it's this whole concept of starting with a why. Putting the why at the heart of everything you do, right? And based on some research that he did, he looked at what makes some of the most famous people and organizations. So he looked at sports people from Muhammad Ali, then he looked at some organizations like Apple and Google and all those organizations, and tried to sort of come up with what are some of the key things that make those organizations so successful, right? And what he got to understand is the sort of 3 realms, or sort of 3 sort of circles of what organizations do, and they are distinct, but sometimes organizations don't know how to distinguish between the 3. And the most critical one is what's in the center, which is the why, right? And that's why you need to start with the why. And what he picked up is very few organizations or people in general actually know why they do what they do. Right? What is it that gets me up in the morning to do what I do? What's that purpose? And that whole discussion around being a purpose-driven organization, which has been at the heart and soul of Umoya since the beginning, is answered by that why. And that why is can be some sort of purpose, some sort of cause or belief that you strongly hold. And it's the reason the organization exists, right? It's the reason that there is a need for that organization in society. Now, the most critical thing to understand about the why is it's not only applicable to organizations working towards social good or social change or social impact, organizations like Umoya, but it definitely is applicable to all organizations. And it speaks to the purpose that exists for the organization, which can be translated to the purpose that exists for the people working within the organization, which will drive the sort of way in which the organization interacts with people, both internally and externally, and actually drive that whole drive towards people be getting excited by the work they do and people having this sort of meaning behind whatever it is that they're doing, right? And I mean, the whole concept of finding meaning or working towards meaning for the people who work within the organization may seem a little philosophical, right, at a high level. But if you actually think about it, it actually comes down to a very simplistic way of thinking about it, where if people know how the work that they do impacts not only on the organization, but on themselves and the people around them, people will have that desire to actually do well, right? People will have that excitement, will have that drive to actually drive towards that purpose and to generate that meaning for themselves and those around them. So in the work that I do on a day-to-day basis, the work that actually pays the bill, besides being a director of Umoya, which I love with all my heart, as Connie mentioned in the beginning, I am involved in a couple of other social enterprises. What we generally find is we get into an organization, so we do a lot of operational improvement work, business improvement work, and we'll get in and we get to interact and engage with people throughout the different levels of the organization, right? So we start all the way from executives all the way to people working at the coalface, especially in mining. So we do a lot of work in mining as well. And what you generally find is you engage with the senior managers and the exco, and the problem is we can't get the full potential out of our organization, out of our people. Our people aren't operating at the correct level of productivity. And once you sort of start peeling that away and actually engaging with the people on the ground, you find that it all comes back to this why question, right? People don't have a clear understanding of what's the vision that the company is driving towards and how do they contribute towards making that vision happen. Right? What does it mean for me? And what does it mean for my colleagues that I work with on a day-to-day basis? So if people don't truly believe in that and believe in what the work that they're doing, they just won't have that drive and desire to actually perform at the level that they're supposed to reach the ultimate potential. So that's the whole reason why starting with the why is so important. So that's all about purpose, making sure that you're addressing the right purpose. For a social change organization like ourselves, it's always making sure that we also understand the needs of the people that we're trying to serve to make sure that whatever we're doing is driving towards the purpose that we've set as an organization. So all of that then feeds into the how, right? The how is some organizations sort of understand the how. So this is the business model, right? This is your operating model. So it's sort of how do we make the why happen, right? It's what is the way we do business? What is the way we do what we do on a daily basis to make sure that we achieve our purpose? Now, a lot of organizations unclear on this as well. It's just a matter of legacy and a lot of processes that have been built over time, but nobody really takes a step back to think through how does this help us achieve our why and get to that purpose. And I'll touch a bit on that in the next couple of slides in terms of the social enterprise model and how we as Umoya have chosen to adopt that as a way to make sure that we can achieve the purpose that we want to achieve in the work that we do. And obviously the last bit of the circles is the what, which is the outer circle, which is what we do, which is most people are clear on that. It's I produce diamonds, I produce platinum. That's easy enough generally for people to answer, but it's linking those three together that's generally not well understood. And yeah, as Craig touched on a little bit earlier, and that touches on the how as well, that whole agility and how you're able to work in a fluid environment and generate results in a very short space of time. And this is a concept that we would like to put to you guys. So the reason we're sharing this as well, and what the lesson we thought would be sort of impactful for people in the mining space is a lot of times we find that a lot of mining companies work in communities. The communities may be not too happy with the mining companies' relations with them. And we know mining companies have CSI and ESG initiatives, but there's also sometimes quarrels around, is this fair? Is it, is it equitably shared? And this could be a model where the organization can actually share and take a different perspective on the work that they do in the CSI or social space, so that you start with the why, you understand why you're doing the work you're doing, what's the change you want to achieve in the society, and that will drive the how can you get everyone in the community involved, and then that will drive the what are some of the projects that you need to fund from an ESD CSI perspective to actually make sure that you're not isolating certain people within the community, you're involving everyone in the community, and everyone is working towards a common purpose. Right? Move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is at a high level sort of what you find as a spectrum. Now, social enterprises aren't a legal entity yet in South Africa. There isn't such a thing as a social enterprise that you can go to CIPC or the Register of Companies and register as. It's a relatively new concept. And it's distinctly different from the way nonprofits, which is number 1, which is on the far left, and how for-profit enterprises traditionally operate, which is number 7, right? Number 1, which is normal MPOs that everyone is used to, and the way most companies engage with charitable organizations in the communities, is we give some sort of funding, some sort of grant money, and this organization is expected to sort of meet whatever social objectives that they have. Now, generally that works if the funding, can be continued and sustained for a long period of time. But as we've seen with COVID as well, sometimes this can be very problematic for the enterprise itself or the NPO itself and the people who benefit from it as well, right? Because as soon as the funding is cut back, the organization can't fund all the social initiatives as well in the community, then it becomes a bit problematic in that some of the organizations end up closing, they can't do what they used to do, and it has knock-on effects on those people who are benefiting from those programs as well. On the far end, we have traditional commerce enterprises, which most of us probably work for or work in. And that's, shareholders who have a share in the business, they've invested money, they expect some sort of return, and that's what drives the organization, right? It's all profit maximization, making sure we get the most out of the organization to give back to the shareholders what they put in. And that doesn't really, isn't really conducive for any sort of social impact or making sure that we're doing a greater good out of the work that we do. Now, over the years, somewhere in between 2 and 6, there's been this gray space that's been developing, and some loosely defined definitions around what social enterprise is, right? Some more towards the charitable side, like number 2, with the charity with on-mission trading. So this could be an example of an organization that says, look, Woolies, you have a lot of food going to waste. What I'll do is I'll have a social or NPO that comes in, takes all the waste that you guys would have thrown away, and I'll redistribute it, right? And I'll redistribute it to people who are in need. So that's sort of, they'd be in some sort of trading contract with a normal enterprise, but they have very much a social impact as their drive or social purpose. And then the social benefit purpose organizations was 3, 4, and 5, and 6. You're moving to more for-profit organizations. Social benefit purpose organization would be one that really focuses on what is the social benefit of the work that we do, right? So they'll take most of their whatever they get, reinvest it, but still relying a lot of grant funding, a lot of charity funding. They're not really sustainable as a standalone organization yet. The same with social purpose and social responsible businesses. They just sort of have a leg within the organization, maybe that is a CSI leg that does some sort of social responsible business with other people. And that makes them a socially responsible business because they're contributing to that space. Where we probably fit the most is around number 6, which is a business which generates profit for charitable expenditure, right? Which is the Umoya model. So the gist of how Umoya operates as a social enterprise is we are a for-profit business. However, the business has been structured in such a way that all the proceeds, all the profit that is made by the organization is actually put back into the organization, put back into other organizations, put back into different other projects that can actually benefit the communities and societies in which we operate as well. So just to expand that a little bit further, now we put the word there experimental because we are experimenting a bit with this model for social innovation. We're finding and learning new things as we go along, and we're adapting as we go along as well. So the way we structured it is we've made this now part of our legal sort of operating model, in that the MOI and the shareholders agreement clearly stipulate the conditions under which the organization operates to ensure that it's still working towards that why, still working towards that purpose, which is the reason why the organization exists. Now, before I talk about what's on the left, let me talk a bit on what's on the right, which is sort of some of the key characteristics that that sort of emanate from this sort of model. Number one key, again, is purpose-driven. So the purpose is always the driver of everything we do in the organization. We strive to meet the needs of local communities, again, engaging with the local communities, understanding what the actual needs are, not just coming in with solutions that they may not need. Having a diverse funding sort of model, so having different funding sources. So we've developed a lot of key strategic relationships with some for-profit organizations and some non-profit organizations as well that provide funding in the space. There's job creation. So through some of the projects that we do, we aim to create jobs for people and actually get people who can actually be self-sufficient and self-sustain themselves. Again, we involve all the stakeholders, include government, people in the community, business as well. So we don't work in isolation, we get everyone involved. You need to be innovative. So as Craig alluded to, you need to be quick on your feet, thinking outside the box, throwing away the box sometimes. Other key characteristic is being business-like and dynamic. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, got to run it professionally, got to run it like a normal enterprise would run, just that the purpose is slightly different. And again, the last point is the unique legal structure, which I touched on, where we have now made this into the actual structure of the organization as part of the MOI and the shareholders agreement. And some of the things you see on the left are some of the critical things that we've given as examples of how you can actually drive this model and how you can engage differently with some of the CSI and enterprise supply development projects that you guys engage on a day-to-day basis. So the governance obviously sets the tone, just making sure that everyone is still, operating ethically and morally. So it's been written in the shareholders agreement that Umoya operates as a for-profit business, but our key objectives in healthcare, right? We don't accept donations directly, but we work closely with Rotary to broaden the base of quality healthcare. So just from a governance point of view, because Rotary is used to doing these things, they're reputable, they have good governance systems for getting donations, and we don't want any muddying of the waters in terms of receiving donations directly, as we are a for-profit organization that makes a profit at the end of the day. All shareholders in the company hold equal number of shares, right? Currently it's 10, and you cannot hold any more or any less. You can only sell your shares to the company from the same value, which is R0. So you can never make any money from being a shareholder of the organization. The directors of the company are not entitled to any remuneration, so you don't get paid for doing the work within Umoya as a director, and there's no payments of dividends to shareholders as well, right? All reserves in the company are sort of set out clearly in the MOI, and they're all reinvested into running other projects and furthering the work of Umoya in the healthcare space. So that's just a bit in terms of how collaboration could potentially look like, what we've sort of structured as an experimental model for us to get going as a social enterprise, as I mentioned earlier. Since it's not an actual legal entity you can register in South Africa, we've come up with a way, we've been innovative, and yeah, we'll put the challenge out to some of you guys as well in the mining space who work in these sort of environments to actually find those organizations that are purpose-driven, that are looking to actually meet the needs of organizations and who can be sustainable beyond just your engagement with them and funding, just to get them up and running as well. Yeah, cool. At this stage, I think I've sort of gone over my time a little bit. I'll hand over to Dave, who'll take us through the last bit of the presentation.
Cheers. Thanks, Anthony. So I'm going to spend a few minutes really describing how we work together as a group and what it might look like if others want to draw something from this. And I'll give an example of how this has helped us to deliver a project. I think the first point I'd like to make is that this is a reflection on what's actually evolved when the group came together, and it wasn't really designed to be like this at the outset. Although somewhat accidental in origin, we're now much more aware of the way we work together, and we really make a conscious effort to stick to what has worked for us. For each of our team members, the journey has been quite a lot about learning more about ourselves, and that being ourselves and showing up as ourselves, it's an important personal aspect of the work we do. We don't try to be what others might like us to be. And being ourselves, it makes it somewhat easier to develop and maintain the relationships between us. And we see that maintaining these relationships has been more important than, in fact, the tasks that we undertake. Now, this might seem, quite dysfunctional if you have a long experience in a hierarchical and autocratic environment, such as mining. But for us, the sound, genuine and productive relationships underpin the work we do. And this approach has helped us to generate plenty of diversity of thought, which in turn it promotes discussion and debate and ultimately helps us arrive at a course of action. And in these discussions, we try to avoid criticizing each other's views. We try to reframe our positions into one of inquiry, seeking clarity and more information. So we might often ask, tell me more about this, rather than to argue why my opinion is better than yours. And over time, this has become easier. And we've grown to recognize and value each other's experience, our skills and expertise. And we've become quite comfortable at acceding to one another from time to time. We don't have hierarchical leaders. We don't have positions and titles, although some of us do carry designations such as director, shareholder, public officer, etc. And that's really for legal compliance purposes. But our leadership practice is really a distributed one, where leaders in a given situation emerge and step up naturally from within our group, and they take accountability for the work which has to be done. Something that often crops up in our team discussions and our decision-making processes are the questions: is this aligned with Umoya's vision and of the future and of our purpose? And will this contribute to creating the future that we want? And our work entails interacting extensively with others on the outside of our own team, in a range from where there might be needs and opportunities to being part of dialogues and platforms where we can contribute to the success of others, and that's done particularly through collaboration and partnerships. Connecting groups and people to bringing them together, that's also part of the work that we do. And many of our opportunities have come from listening to and engaging with others, and that's particularly the case with frontline healthcare workers. And these discussions have resulted in business opportunities for us, and the Ox era is one example of that. We have another product about to be launched called MTOx, which is a very simple mechanical warning device for when an oxygen cylinder runs out. We have spacers and nebulizers for the application of medicines into respiratory treatment. We're running a project on a containerized oxygen generating plant with some cylinder handling equipment, and that we're starting something on redesigning hospital beds. So all of these things have come out from discussing it with others. If you could change the slide, Anthony, please. So if I look at what we have, what we've experienced, and try to depict it concisely in a way that could perhaps be used by others, it fits kind of in a model of connected or distributed leadership. And this model can be portrayed in terms of four intelligences, which are characteristic of the network of people who make up the team. These are characteristics not of individuals, but of the group as a whole, which grows and learns together. And if you look at them, these intelligences make up a fairly well-balanced mix, which any team can exploit in order to become more effective. With the Umoya team, it's a very comfortable and natural fit, and it aligns well to the humanitarian focus of our work. But I really see no reason why it wouldn't work for other businesses, project teams, and working groups. It's a way of working together which acknowledges each team member's own makeup, their background, their history, their values and personal priorities, and we connect these with others in the team in a socially mature way without really trying to change them. And we find this has built very strong functional relationships. And all of this helps to shape the culture and ethos of the organization, which is held together by its purpose and by its narrative or its story. And this becomes stronger over time as it evolves, and it creates this really strong sense of belonging and group identity. And we strengthen and improve this identity by being embracive and inclusive of others, and welcoming and having a welcoming and really an open approach to bringing others into the group, and creating an environment where the team really interacts quite easily with external groups and society in general. And through all of these interactions, we kind of get some resolution of complex issues and problems, and we make sense of them, and we get contributions towards developing the future that we want, and that includes some business opportunities. So, as I mentioned, we didn't really consciously start work under this framework, rather it fell into place under the motivation of COVID as a burning platform, and this common desire to be a contributor rather than a bystander during the COVID pandemic. And the end result for us, the Umoya team, it's what we've grown into, which is a cohesive team. I mean, it really seems more like friends and family than work. We've met and connected really to a vast array of people, which none of us could have imagined beforehand. I think really importantly, we're having fun. We've designed and manufactured good products which are having an impact when in use. We built a good, albeit modest business with its unique constitution, which Anthony spoke about. And we see this as being, really a replicable form of social enterprise. We've got a network of partnerships, and I think all of us have this very strong sense of satisfaction of having achieved something, really quite special. And I'd also add, from a personal perspective, that being committed and engaged in work which has had a real impact in responding to the pandemic is pretty much removed for me a lot of the uncertainty and stress which I think many people have experienced during this time. So that's quite a high-level overview of how we work together, and we'll be happy to share more detail of our thoughts on that if anyone is interested. And it's potentially a blueprint for others, or at least an inventory of ideas to take away. Now, the last few minutes, I'd just like to share an example of a piece of work which we're doing, which illustrates some of the points I've made. Coming out of the first and the second waves of COVID, and the development, licensing, and putting into use the Oxera product, we kind of sought feedback and comment from users beyond the device itself into a broader set of COVID and healthcare related problems and opportunities. And prevalent throughout really most of the world during this first and second wave particularly was an acute shortage of medical oxygen in hospitals. And this was amplified in the remote and rural settings, such as we have in the Eastern Cape here. And out there, hospitals frequently find themselves running out of costly cylinder-based oxygen, and they're really at the end of a fairly tenuous supply and logistics chain. And in our conversations and interactions, we asked, what if the oxygen supply was reliable, plentiful, cheaper at these places? What could happen then? Or what would happen then? What if healthcare workers didn't have to worry about cylinders running out, or where was the next cylinder coming from? What could happen then? And really the common possibility across the board was that the provision of oxygen is an essential facility in hospitals, and that better patient care and outcomes are likely. So we've partnered with the Madweleni Rural Hospital in the Eastern Cape to evaluate an in-use of a containerized PSA oxygen generating plant. Incidentally, the Madweleni Hospital, it serves a set of rural communities which are heavily impacted by the presence of ex-mine workers, many of whom have impaired respiratory function as a result of TB and silicosis. And this project is essentially, it's a 5-way collaboration in which Umoya is playing a pivotal role connecting funders, sponsors, technology suppliers with the hospital and its community. And we do this through the provision of a service which includes the initiation of the project, scoping of the project management and maintenance. But it's very much reliant on all partners bringing their contribution to the table. The hardware consists of a pressure swing absorption oxygen plant, which produces medical grade oxygen. It's generated on site and it connects to the water reticulation system along with the necessary reliability monitoring and backup systems. And importantly, the project embraces the Department of Health's long-term strategy for the region, and that includes the creation of treatment hubs. The project's pretty much complete, so next week we will complete the final factory acceptance tests in Cape Town, and the week after we will ship the plant to Madweleni for commissioning, and it should really be in beneficial use by mid-December. It's pretty much a pilot project. It's not about the technology really, but more about how to use the technology in low resource settings such as Madweleni. And in 6 months or so, we should have an idea of how it's going, and we should be able to report back on the proposition of on-site generation in rural hospitals in South Africa. And then perhaps with improvements, we can replicate the concept in other hospitals around the country. So that's kind of it. We've presented our story. It's very much an experiment. The idea really is that others may draw inspiration on what we've done and some information. And we feel that there's an opportunity in the world of mining to use our products as part of the healthcare offering, but also our approach in mobilizing task teams and project work where it may serve as an alternative model. And there's clearly an application, I think, in the social impact investment and entrepreneurial development in mining communities, which will generate this broader sense of benefit and ownership by the host communities and perhaps some of the current models. Gugu, I think it's over to you now if you want to coordinate a few questions and discussions, but yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to Dave, Anthony.
Sorry, yeah.
No, it's okay, Dave. Yeah, so we do have a couple of questions. The first one is, what has been the most rewarding part of this journey, professionally and personally? I think any one of you three can answer or respond.
Sure, perhaps I can respond there. Thank you. So I think just first of all how exciting it is to work with people who are operating from the same heart as you when it comes and who have a genuine desire to make a difference. And I think all of us have that within us. We all want to see the world a little better than when we started, and all of us would like to see the broader purpose behind the work that we do. So so that for me has been the most enjoyable. Has been to see people be able to flourish and contribute in such a meaningful way and find such personal joy from doing that, and to be able to see how generous people really are when they get down to it. So yeah, I think that, and then professionally, you know, as a doctor, being able to come up with a new medical device has been incredibly rewarding. And talk about them in the medical space, and I guess my, you know, I'm always quick to remind people that I'm one small piece of a very big puzzle, and this would not have been possible without the collaboration and involvement of so many different people. And so that professionally has been just wonderful to be able to interact and engage with people from such diverse backgrounds, and achieve something so meaningful.
Okay, thank you, Craig.
There's also another question here from George Dellis. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'll be back there. My connection at the hospital here is not fantastic, so my apologies for that. So there's a question here from George Dellis. If I can take a minute to answer that. George is asking how easy is it to translate from a volunteer-based environment where work is pro bono and people are getting behind a cause. How can that philosophy be translated back into our traditional mining projects that are under so many pressures from budget constraints, time constraints, funding constraints. So and certainly it definitely is easier rallying around a social cause. And if we think of something like COVID with such a massive global impact, certainly it's easier to find alignment and a heart on those. But I've been involved in many mining projects. I was a project manager myself, and I think by completely ignoring that side of it, I think we're missing out on a lot of potential. And if I think of many of the projects I was involved in, our focus was on really staffing up the team with the right resources, making very clear demands on what the schedule was, what the budget was, how hard we expected everyone to work. And that as engineers, we can get marginally excited about that. It's true. We can and delivering a project on time and on budget, that can, we enjoy the braai afterwards, we enjoy the accolades that come with that. But I think we're missing something if we don't find what the underlying heart is for that project. So what's the bigger picture? What is this? What is this project delivering in a meaningful way? And then allowing people to sort of sign up, if you like, and allowing the team to sort of naturally evolve rather than some senior manager, delegating this XYZ team. I think if we allowed more space for teams to naturally form around, and then if we articulated what the broader purpose was, and perhaps it's an internal one, maybe it's not an external one, it's that it'll allow our business to do XYZ. Creating shareholder value is something we always put out there, and it's on every sort of vision and mission statement. But for the average guy on the average project, that doesn't get him up every morning saying, I'm excited today about creating shareholder value. That's that's got me motivated. And so if that's not motivating him, let's find what is. And it's generally around the heart, the purpose, and beyond the nuts and bolts of the project. So that's my suggestion. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe just to add something, Craig, you mentioned it's easier to rally people around a social impact project like ours, but actually it shouldn't be, because if you think about the social impact that a mining project, for example, has versus the impact that we could have as well, it's far broader, right? The number of people get employed, the schools that are built there, everything that goes along with it. And exactly to your point, it's not articulated in that way, so people don't think about it that way, right? And if you think about it, if you were to tell a person every morning to say you will contribute towards, building a mine or building a new project, whatever it may be, if you're installing water for the local communities, that'll mean the communities around there will have employment, people will have jobs, people will have food, people will have better healthcare, people will just be better off for the work that you do. You're more likely to be able to get that excitement, get people to drive towards the same purpose as well. So it should be easier actually for mining projects, considering the scale of impact that they have, but it's not articulated properly. that end.
Okay. Thank you, Craig and Anthony. We have another question here that's asking, how did you raise the startup funding for the business?
Yeah, maybe I'll have a go at this one. So this is quite interesting in that we really didn't put in any money ourselves of note, any of the Umoya team. What we actually did was to partner with others who were motivated by our purpose, and they came to the party at risk, and there was, I would say, there's 3 or 4 significant partners there, each of which who put in some time, some money, some resources at risk, and each of which have been paid back for the risk that they took and the money that they put at risk. And that happened actually rather quickly, because right at the beginning of the work, we Craig mentioned right at the beginning the PEEP valves, and we manufactured and sold over 100,000 of those, and that completely changed the cash position of the business straight away. So it was the short answer to the question is we raised the money through partnering at risk with others, and they've all been paid back.
Okay, thank you, Dave. We have 2 more questions. The one is from Juliet LeBron. She says, firstly, congratulations on all your work. It's got an incredible impact. Have you considered partnering with social enterprises in other countries to go regional?
Can I answer that one again? I'm going to jump in ahead of you, Anthony. So meeting the needs of under-resourced communities and starting to address some of the challenges around the medical device manufacture and supply, which costs are spiraling out of control, and the gap between those who can afford it and those who can't is growing. And so certainly our neighboring countries and really the rest of Africa and South America, Asia, there's a huge need for certainly the Oxera product, as well as some of the other ideas that we have. We see that as our market, and we've been very privileged to work with some partners in our neighboring countries. Kufema is an NGO in Zimbabwe that we've worked closely with, have a great relationship with them. They do amazing work in helping Zimbabwe manage their COVID response. And if you think of a low resource country, I mean, Zim, fits the bill perfectly. If you get admitted to hospital, you must bring your own needles, syringes, and IV fluids. They just really have so little to work with. So it's been really satisfying working with companies with a similar heart and a passion to serve. So yes, absolutely. We're looking forward to extending and growing those relationships.
Okay, thank you, Craig. And then the final question is from Dylan Sishan Molding, who is asking, since the COVID waves have been reducing, are the hospitals still asking for more ventilators?
I probably need to answer that one too, as the doctor here. So it was amazing. So the initial focus when COVID started, there were lots of projects around building ventilators. So I was part of a number of those, in an advisory capacity. But very early on, we realized that we could do with a few more ventilators, but our issues were ICU space and trained staff to use the ventilators. So the focus very quickly shifted from trying to build ventilators in terms of any meaningful volume. And then we also found that there were lots of companies who once they'd managed to deal with the first wave peaks overseas, made their units available. They'd scaled up production of existing ventilators. And so there were a number of ventilators donated to certainly to the public sector. So We actually found now in our particular hospital where we have, we've got boxes of ventilators that have been donated through people like USAID, and some of them are quite useful. We now have transport ventilators that we didn't have before for moving patients around. And then there's a number, in boxes that, maybe we'll get to use one day. The problem remains that we don't have, once intubating and ventilating someone requires a whole system to manage that patient. You need the skilled staff to, first of all, intubate the patient. You need the drugs and equipment to do that. And then to keep them intubated and ventilated requires massive resources and skill. They're COVID-19 patients are very difficult to ventilate, and they require sophisticated ventilators. And even then, the success rate's really low in terms of survival. So, the rough and ready early days of, we had all those ideas on the internet about using ambu bags and things like that. Those never went anywhere, none of them, because they were just too crude and didn't solve the problem. All they did was move air. They were a very small, sort of rough and ready piece in a very delicate picture that just didn't fit. So we certainly don't need more ventilators. I think what we do need is we need more nursing staff. We need more ICU space, and critically, we need more ICU trained doctors. That's our biggest gap at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Craig. Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar. It's been very insightful. We learned quite a lot about Umoya and how it came to life, as well as just social enterprises in general. I'm sure if anyone has further questions, maybe Gugu or Camilla will share the panelist details. But for now, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Georgia, give us a shout. I'd love to chat further.